and things. I'm really scrambled. I'm emotional. Usually it takes me a while to get into a speech before I get emotional, but it's difficult. This is why 9/11 families don't get involved, because it's just so sore. It's like I'm back that day. And when we got a call about or when I saw the towers come down, and I don't want to go into that whole story. I'm going to talk about Bobby, and I want to go into Tower 1. Bobby died, or we had a difficult time finding what happened to Bobby. Bobby worked at Merrill Lynch. Bobby's a Princeton graduate. He was an English major with a minor in African American literature. Profoundly intelligent person. 26 years old. And if you talk to anybody about Bobby, the first thing people would say, if you had met him, Bobby was here and you're sitting down with him, you would never know that he was, a Princeton grad, honors in high school, captain of his basketball team. Because if you sat with him for an hour, you'd be the only one ever speaking. And you'd walk away and I said, I don't know anything about that kid. That's how good he was with people. Never, ever would ever talk about himself. He left Princeton, went to New York. He wanted to be a writer. Great, great writer. Prolific reader. Constantly reading. And this is where I get my energy and my strength, because he believed knowledge is power. And that's the truth. And it gives me power. And when he went to New York, he was in publishing. Because he figured, well, this is going to be my thing. I want to be a writer. And then he then got into the PR business, and his only job was to work with Merrill Lynch. Well, right before, I guess it was July 2001, Merrill Lynch offered him a job as Vice President of Media Relations, because he was just such a great writer. He would do writing for people in Merrill Lynch, because not many people have great writing skills. And ultimately, he made a deal with Merrill Lynch that he was going to get his MBA, either at Penn or Harvard. He was going to enroll in either place. And Merrill Lynch would help him with it, because we couldn't afford it anymore after 4 years at Princeton. And then they said, well, you work with us for 2 years. Then you can do anything you want. He loved his job. So he worked across the street at Merrill Lynch, North Tower, and across the street, West Street, was Merrill Lynch. So that day, and again, I don't want to get into the whole day itself. I really want to talk about the North Tower. But I worked at a psychiatric hospital as a counselor and a teacher. And someone called me in and we watched the towers going down. And I really wasn't that worried, because he worked at Merrill Lynch. Well, anyway, we never got a phone call from him. And of course, that's when we started getting worried. We went up Tuesday, and that week, and believe it or not, we're lucky ones. We took him home. Because, I have a Philadelphia support group, and they haven't found a piece of their children. And most of them have lost children. So I want to take you into that morning. I want to go into the North Tower. I spent a lot of time this week reading the news reports. And of course, this report. Now, I've read it. I spent, after 9/11, I got involved with Peaceful Tomorrows, and it was the greatest thing that ever happened in my life. I got to go to Japan. I spoke in Bogota. I really had an opportunity to speak what I felt. And I thought that the Afghan war and the Iraq war were just ridiculous, regardless of who did it. The story being 19 Arabs killed my son. I said, what are we going to war for? Let's bring them to justice. So I had the opportunity to join Peaceful Tomorrows. And we did astounding things. And I was able to speak to the world. For years, I went to high schools. Everybody wanted me to speak because I wasn't seeking revenge. And they loved that message. But then after going to these 9/11 committees, I made 90% of these commission hearings. And it was a joke. And again, it was after Condoleezza Rice spoke in the hearings. And it was a filibuster. She could care less. about what happened. She just kept saying, well, we have to keep things in historical perspective. Well, I've never been so pissed off in all my life. And that's when I made the decision. I had an interview with CBC afterwards. And I just, people all around, I said, this is effing ridiculous. I was so pissed off. Now, I've carried that anger. That's why I get so emotional, because I have that anger. Tremendous anger. And I have to really watch myself. I have to work hard to keep my sanity. Because that's all I do. And I know the truth hasn't been told. You look at this book, and Manny mentioned Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. 441 footnotes in this book. 441 footnotes. Talking about the story, the masterminds of 9/11. Yet this man was tortured 183 times. That's what they based the whole book on. And it's based on torture. Yet American citizens accept this, that we will actually torture people to get a confession. And I doubt very much the man is alive. But that's here and there. So what I want to talk about is that morning. Keep it in the context. I'm not going to talk about Building 7, but move right into Building 7. 846, I think the seconds were, 846:40. Bobby came down. He lived at 66 between 1st and 2nd. And it's taken me, I finally talked to the doctor who examined him that morning. He was taken right from the morgue. He was one of the first 10 bodies found. At first, we were upset that we thought that Merrill Lynch was running a seminar on the 106th floor. And we thought that, geez, maybe he was up there. But the fact that we found the body, we figured, how could that have happened? And then, my wife even said, do you think he jumped? Well, the thought of that was just, although I really admired the people that did it because they made the decision how they're going to die. I mean, that's probably the most courageous act I've ever could think of. But through my investigation, when I do the 9/11 investigations, I'm also trying to find out exactly how my son died. And I want you all to put yourself in my shoes. It's hard enough losing a child. But then when your child's murdered, and, people say, well, if you had found any closure, you'll never find closure. I think the best way to look at it is that your suffering isn't as bad as it used to be. A psychiatrist told me, we did a lot of therapy. It's tough on families. And we had to work these through. My wife doesn't want to talk about 9/11, which I don't blame her. But he said, it's like you have a $50 bill right afterwards, and you just can't see anything. Plus years go by, that goes out here, so you see peripherally. I can laugh. At first, your suffering is just as overwhelming. You grieve. But the pain is still there, and I make the decision to keep the pain. It's important. But this is why 9/11 families don't get involved. Who wants to go through this shit? Really, it's tough. So, that morning is very important to me, how he died. Did he suffer? And again, put yourself in my shoes. Now, put yourself in my shoes and think of this. Your loved one, your child, daughter, or son were murdered. This is a murder, regardless of who did it. Now, I go to all these investigations, or, all the commission hearings. Now, let me just read. Now, Bobby died, I'm 100% sure. He died as the plane hit or even before the plane hit. And that's what I want to talk about. Okay? Because I sat down, I didn't look at his pictures. I had pictures of him. But at the morgue in New York City, so look, I strongly recommend that you don't look at him. I feel bad that I didn't. I can still look at him if I want. But his wounds or his death, I think it was immediately spontaneous. I don't think he ever knew what hit him. Because all his injuries were in the chest. Lacerations in the chest. His whole face was blown apart. Over the years, we've actually gotten a piece of his brains, his little pieces of skull. That's brutal, but I feel good getting them. Then we take them home because it's at that dingy little morgue. They have all this stuff in the trailers. And people are really having a difficult time taking these pieces of their body. But I have people in the support group, my support group, that they have nothing. You're talking about a body that's blown to, it's atomized.